I thought I was saving her life, but in reality, I was only building my own coffin. For 730 consecutive days, I existed in a state of self-inflicted, systematic starvation. I didn't just skip meals. I hollowed out my very soul to fill a bank account that I thought was keeping my mother breathing. I lived in a room in a dilapidated corner of New Jersey, a space that smelled of damp concrete, stale coffee, and the thick, oily exhaust from the 6-lane highway that roared 20 feet from my window. The walls were so thin that I could hear my neighbor's ragged cough every night, a sound that reminded me of the mortality I was fighting against. 3,000 miles away, I worked double shifts sometimes, triple in a shipping warehouse where the temperature never rose above freezing. In the winter, my breath would crystallize on the collar of my worn jacket, and the sweat on my back would turn to a thin sheet of ice the moment I stopped moving. My knuckles were permanently cracked, a roadmap of red fissures that bled into the cheap work gloves I couldn't afford to replace. I was a ghost in a machine, a nameless shadow moving crates of luxury electronics, designer silks and Italian leathers, items that cost more than my entire life's earnings all to earn the $5,000 a month that I believed was the only thing keeping my mother's heart beating. I did it all for her. Every drop of sweat, every sleepless hour, every pang of hunger. Every month, the notification would chime on my phone like a funeral bell. Transfer successful. $5,000 gone, sent into the void. To me, it was a lifeline. To the world, it was just digits on a screen. I sent it to Marcus, my childhood best friend, the man I trusted more than I trusted myself. He was the one holding my mother's hand in the hospital while I was breaking my back in the dark. He was my eyes, my ears, and my conscience. "The tumor is aggressive today, Leo," my mother would whisper over the phone. Her voice was always thin, a fragile thread of sound that seemed ready to snap if I breathed too hard. "The doctors, they say the new immunotherapy is the only way, but it's so expensive, son. Maybe it's time to let me go. I don't want to be the reason you're suffering." I would scream into my pillow after those calls, the sound muffled by the thin fabric as I punched the concrete walls until my hands were numb. "No, Mum. I'll get the money. I'll work more. Just stay with me. Please, just stay." I sold my blood plasma twice a week until the track marks on my arms made the nurses look at me with suspicion. I took under-the-table construction jobs on my Sundays, hauling bags of cement until my spine felt like it was made of jagged glass. I was 24 years old, but when I looked in the mirror, I saw a man of 50. My eyes were sunken pits of exhaustion, my skin the color of old, damp parchment. But Marcus kept the pressure on, never letting me come up for air. "Leo, the surgeons need the next installment for the ventilator rental." He'd text at 3 a.m. "I'm at the clinic now. She's looking weak, man. You gotta hurry. If we miss this payment, they'll move her to a public ward." He would send me photos of sterile hallways, blurred medical monitors, and trays of surgical steel. I was too blinded by love and terror to realize they were just stock photos downloaded from a search engine. I was too hungry to see the pixels. The cracks only started to appear 6 months ago. The calls became shorter, more hurried. My mother started sounding different, not healthier, but distant, guilt-ridden. When I'd ask about the specifics of her pain, she'd give vague, rehearsed answers. When I'd ask to speak to her oncologist, Marcus would claim that the privacy laws had changed and that the hospital was under a strict lockdown. "I'm coming home, Mum," I finally said one rainy Tuesday morning. I had managed to save an extra $1,000 by sleeping on the warehouse floor for a month, eating nothing but discarded fruit from the loading dock. I bought a ticket. "I'm coming to be there for your final recovery. I need to see you." The silence on the other end of the line lasted 10 agonizing seconds. It was a silence that felt like a falling building. "No," she finally whispered. Her voice wasn't raspy anymore. It was sharp, piercing, terrified. "The germs. Leo, the hospital says your international travel makes you a bio-risk. If you come here, they'll move me to a quarantine wing. You'll kill me just by being in the room. Stay there, work, send the final payment for the discharge fee. That's all I need from you." That was the first time I felt the cold, oily hand of suspicion wrap around my throat. Why would a dying mother refuse her only son's face? I didn't listen. I took my small bag, my one-way ticket, and the remaining $300 in my pocket. I didn't tell Marcus. I didn't tell her. When I landed in my hometown, the air felt wrong. It smelled of rain, ozone, and 1,000 old lies. I went straight to the St. Jude private wing. I walked up to the reception desk, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped, dying bird. "I'm here to see Elena Rossi," I said, my voice cracking with 2 years of suppressed emotion. The receptionist frowned, clicking through her computer database. "Rossi, Elena. I'm sorry, sir. We haven't had a patient by that name in the history of this hospital. Are you sure you have the right wing?" I felt the blood drain from my face, leaving me lightheaded and cold. Check again. "Cancer ward. Room 302. Marcus Sterling has been making the payments." She looked at me with genuine heartbreaking pity. "Sir, room 302 is a storage closet for cleaning supplies, and we don't have a cancer ward on this floor. This is the maternity wing. Are you sure you're in the right city?" I stood there, surrounded by the sound of newborn babies crying, the sound of beginning lives, and realized that for 2 years, I had been mourning a woman who wasn't even sick. My $120,000, the total price of my youth, my health, and my very sanity had been vaporized into a lie. I stood outside my mother's house. This was the sanctuary where I grew up, the place where she used to bake bread every Sunday, and where the smell of jasmine used to drift through the open windows like a blessing. Now it was a corpse. The windows were boarded up with rotting gray plywood. The garden was a jungle of thorns and dead grass. The foreclosure sign nailed to the front door was dated 18 months ago. She hadn't lived here in a year and a half. My mother was a ghost in her own life. I pulled out my phone. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped it into the muddy gutter. I called Marcus. I wanted to hear the lie one more time. I wanted to see how deep the poison went before I cut it out. Ring, ring, ring. Leo, my brother, the man of the hour. Marcus sounded like he was standing on a mountain of gold. In the background, I heard the sophisticated swell of a string quartet and the clinking of expensive crystal. "Why are you calling so early? Did the warehouse give you a bonus? We really need that last wire by noon to clear the surgeon's bill." "How is she, Marcus?" "How is my mother?" My voice was a low, jagged rasp, like a blade being pulled across gravel. "She's struggling, man. It's been a rough morning. The new immunotherapy meds are causing some hallucinations. She's sleeping right now, heavily sedated. Don't call her, okay? It'll just confuse her and set back the progress. Just focus on the money, Leo. We're so close to the finish line. One last push." "Where are you right now, Marcus?" "Me? Just at the office, man. Buried in paperwork, grinding for the both of us." "Why do you ask?" "You sound weird." "I'm at the house, Marcus," I whispered. I looked at the foreclosed sign. I looked at the dead jasmine. I'm looking at the boards on the windows. I'm looking at the decay. "Why didn't you tell me she lost the house?" "Where has the money been going, Marcus?" The line went dead silent. The music in the background seemed to grow louder, mockingly cheerful. I could almost feel his heartbeat through the speaker. "Leo, look." Marcus's voice dropped the friendly brotherhood act. It became cold, clinical, and sharp. "I didn't want to stress you out while you were so far away. We moved her to a private villa. Much better air, much better staff. It was incredibly expensive, which is why we needed the extra $5,000 last month. I'll send you the address tomorrow. I gotta go. I have a big meeting with the board of directors. Talk soon." He hung up. He didn't know I was standing in the ruins of my life. He didn't know I was 3 miles away from him, breathing the same air. I felt a surge of nausea so violent I had to lean against a rusted, cold lamppost to keep from collapsing. They were in this together. My mother, the woman who taught me that honesty was the only currency that mattered. And Marcus, the man I called my brother. They had bled me dry, drop by drop, for 2 years. I wandered the city like a ghost in a dream. I ended up at the city center, where a massive, glowing digital billboard was flashing a series of high society photographs. The social event of the season. The Sterling Vance wedding, Grand Regal Ballroom. Tonight at 7 p.m. The Sterling was Marcus. He had changed his name. He wasn't the scrawny, desperate kid from the slums anymore. He had transformed himself into a sterling, a man of old money and new power. And the bride, Sarah. Sarah. The girl who told me she'd wait for me forever. The girl whose letters stopped coming exactly when the cancer started. The girl who I thought had moved away to take care of her own sick father. I checked the location. The Grand Regal Ballroom was the most expensive venue in the entire country. The floor was made of imported Italian marble. The chandeliers were made of hand-cut Swarovski crystal. A wedding there costs upwards of $250,000. My money, my warehouse shifts, my blood plasma, my hunger, my soul. I didn't have a suit. I didn't have an invitation. I didn't have a name that anyone in that room would recognize. But I had a rage that felt like a physical weight in my chest. A fire that was keeping me warm in the cold evening air. I found the service entrance at the back of the hotel, tucked away near the trash compactors. I watched the catering staff unloading crates of vintage champagne. I waited until a young waiter stepped out for a cigarette. Then I slipped inside through the heavy steel door. I found a locker room for the staff. I put on a crisp white shirt, a black vest, and a stiff black tie. I found a silver tray. I moved with the invisibility of a man who had spent 2 years being a shadow. I pushed through the swinging doors into the ballroom. The opulence was sickening. The air smelled of white lilies, expensive cigars, and $500 an ounce perfume. And there, at the center of the room, sat Marcus. He looked like a king. He was wearing a tuxedo that cost more than my father made in a decade. He was laughing, toasting a group of men in expensive tailored suits. But my eyes didn't stay on him. I scanned the room looking for my mother. I expected to see her at the head table, draped in silk and diamonds, finally showing her true face as the architect of my misery. Instead, I saw a woman in a black maid's uniform standing by a service station near the kitchen doors. She was holding a heavy tray of dirty, grease-stained plates. Her back was hunched. Her hair was grey and thin, pulled back into a tight, painful bun. She wasn't a guest. She wasn't a co-conspirator. She was the help. As I watched, Marcus walked over to her. He didn't offer a hug. He didn't offer a chair. He snapped his fingers in her face and pointed to a glass that had shattered on the floor near his feet. My mother, the woman I thought was dying of a tumor, dropped to her knees and began to pick up the jagged shards with her bare hands while Marcus laughed and walked back to his beautiful bride. The world began to tilt on its axis. I felt a roar in my ears that drowned out the string quartet and the polite laughter of the elite. I watched my mother scrub the floor at Marcus's feet, her hands red and raw from the harsh chemicals and the sharp glass. She wasn't part of the scam. She was a prisoner in a gilded cage. I retreated back into the kitchen for a moment, my heart pounding so hard against my ribs that I thought it would shatter them. I found a black surgical mask in the supply room and pulled it over my face, hiding my sunken features. I pulled my waiter's cap low over my eyes. I grabbed a bottle of vintage red wine and a tray. I walked back onto the floor, moving toward the corner where my mother was now standing, waiting for her next order like a beaten, broken animal. I stood right beside her. I could smell the cheap, industrial detergent on her uniform and the metallic scent of old, cold fear. "Mum," I whispered, my voice barely a breath. She didn't turn. She just straightened her posture, thinking I was a supervisor about to reprimand her. "I'm sorry, sir. I'll have the tables cleared in 5 minutes. Please don't tell Mr. Sterling I'll work the extra shift." "Mum, it's me. It's Leo." The silver tray in her hand shook so violently that the glasses rattled like teeth in a skull. She slowly, painfully turned her head. When her eyes met mine, I saw a flash of terror so pure and deep that it felt like a physical blow to my stomach. "Leo," she breathed, her voice a ghost of the one I remembered. No. You have to go. You have to leave right now before he sees you. He'll hurt you, Leo." "What is this, Mum? Where is the cancer? Why are you here? Why is Marcus treating you like a dog?" "He'll kill you, Leo," she hissed, her eyes darting toward the head table with the frantic rhythm of a trapped bird. "If he sees you, he'll do it. He'll release the files. He told me he has everything ready." "What files, Mum? Tell me the truth." "The money you sent," she whispered, tears finally carving tracks through the dust and grime on her face. He made me sign papers. Leo, he told me that the money you were sending from America was part of a massive laundering scheme for a cartel. He forged your signature on every document. He told me if I didn't work for him, if I didn't keep you sending the money, he'd hand those files to the FBI. He said you'd spend 40 years in a federal cage. I did it to protect you, Leo. I told the lies so you would stay safe. I felt a cold, sharp clarity wash over me. Marcus hadn't just stolen my money. He had built a psychological cage, a prison made of love and guilt. He used our devotion to each other as the lock. He told her I was a criminal to keep her obedient, and he told me she was dying to keep me working. It was a masterpiece of human cruelty, a symphony of betrayal. I don't care about the files. Mum, I said, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl that made the waiter next to me move away. We're leaving. Right now. I'm taking you out of here. I can't, she sobbed, her voice breaking. He has my passport. He has the deed to the house. He told me he has people in New Jersey watching your apartment every single day. He said if I stopped playing the part, he'd have you erased from the world. At the head table, Marcus stood up. He scanned the room with the eyes of a wolf, his gaze landing on the waiter standing too close to his prized servant. His face darkened. He began walking toward us, his gait slow, arrogant, and predatory. Sarah followed him, her white silk dress rustling like a snake in the tall grass. She looked at my mother with a look of pure, unadulterated disgust, as if she were a stain on the carpet. Elena, you're making a scene. This is my wedding day. Get to the kitchen and stay there until the cake is served. You're ruining the aesthetic. Marcus reached out and grabbed my mother's arm, his fingers digging into the bruises. I now realized he had been giving her for months. I asked a question. Who is this waiter and why is he bothering the help? I didn't wait for him to recognize me. I ripped the mask off my face. I took the bottle of red wine and smashed it against the edge of the service table, holding the jagged neck like a dagger. The waiter is the man who paid for your tuxedo, Marcus, I roared, my voice echoing off the high ceilings and silencing the entire room. The room went deathly silent. The music stopped mid-note. The guests turned, their faces masks of confusion, shock, and elitist horror. Marcus didn't flinch. He just smiled, a slow, twisted grin that told me he had been waiting for this moment, that he enjoyed the theater of it. Leo, he said, his voice smooth as silk and cold as ice. I wondered when you'd grow a spine. You always were a bit of a slow learner, weren't you? I have the bank records, Marcus, I said, my hands shaking with a volatile mix of rage, adrenaline, and 2 years of exhaustion. I have every transfer. I have the messages where you lied about the surgeons. I have the photos you sent from the hospital. I'm calling the police. I'm taking my mother and I'm burning your life to the ground tonight. Marcus laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound that made my skin crawl. He stepped closer, ignoring the jagged glass in my hand, confident in his own power. Call them, he whispered, leaning in until I could smell the expensive scotch and the arrogance on his breath. Do it. I'll even give you my phone to make the call. But before the first patrol car arrives at the front gate, I'll hit send on a digital packet I've prepared for the authorities. It contains your confessions to wire fraud and international money laundering. My father-in-law is the district attorney. Leo, who do you think the system is going to protect? The man who just donated $2 million to the police foundation? Or the starving, unhinged warehouse worker with a suspicious bank history? I looked at Sarah. She was looking at me with cold, dead eyes, her beauty now looking like a mask of porcelain. You were always so dramatic, Leo. You should have just stayed in the warehouse. You were useful there. You were a good little worker bee. You helped him, I asked, the betrayal cutting deeper than the glass in my hand ever could. You were the one who knew my handwriting. You were the one who wrote the letters when my mother was too weak to type. We needed a start, Leo, she said, shrugging her thin, elegant shoulders. You were just a means to an end, a scholarship for our future. Marcus turned to the crowd, his voice booming with fake charisma and practiced authority. Ladies and gentlemen, please excuse this unfortunate interruption. Just a disgruntled former employee with a history of mental instability and substance abuse. Security is on their way to escort him out. Please return to your drinks and the music. The guests began to murmur, some turning away in boredom. others still filming with a ghoulish curiosity. Marcus turned back to me, his eyes twin pits of darkness. "Leave now, Leo. Go back to your hole in New Jersey and pretend this never happened. If you do, I'll let your mother live out her days in the basement. I'll even give her an extra meal a week. If you don't, well, I've always wanted to see how a man of your sensitivity handles a federal prison shower." I didn't move. I reached into my pocket, slowly. Marcus flinched, his hand instinctively going to his waistband as if he expected a weapon. I pulled out my phone, the screen cracked but still glowing. "I'm not as stupid as I was 2 years ago. Marcus," I said, my voice eerily calm, "when you spend 14 hours a day alone in a cold warehouse, you have a lot of time to learn things. You have a lot of time to realize that the world isn't built on money anymore. It's built on data. It's built on visibility." I turned the screen toward him. "This isn't a phone call to the police," I said. "I've been live on 3 different platforms since." I walked through the kitchen door. 250,000 people are watching right now. They saw you grab my mother. They heard you admit to the blackmail. They heard Sarah admit to the forgery. They saw the DA's daughter confess to a felony. Marcus's face went from pale to a sickly, mottled gray. The sweat began to bead on his forehead, ruining his $5,000 makeup. "And here's the kicker," I continued, my voice rising so it echoed off the crystal chandeliers like a judgment. "I didn't just stream it. I uploaded the laundering folder you sent me last month, the one you thought was encrypted, with that amateur software too. A public cloud. I sent the link to every major news outlet and investigative journalist in the city 10 minutes ago. The internet is currently deconstructing your shell companies in real time. They've already found your real name. They've already found the offshore accounts you used to pay for the flowers in this room." In the back of the room, the district attorney, Sarah's father, suddenly stood up from his table. He looked at his phone, his face turning the color of wet ash. He didn't look at Marcus. He didn't look at his daughter. He turned and ran for the emergency exit, leaving his reputation behind. Marcus lunged at me. He was no longer the sterling king. He was a cornered, rabid animal. He tackled me into a table of crystal glassware, and the sound of shattering glass was like 1,000 screams. He pinned me to the floor, his hands closing around my throat with a strength born of desperation. "I'll kill you," he screamed, his face twisted in a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. "I'll kill you both before the police get here." I couldn't breathe. My lungs felt like they were filled with lead. The world began to dim at the edges, the bright lights of the ballroom turning into distant stars. I saw the ceiling fans spinning above me like the blades of a helicopter, coming to take me away, and then the weight on my chest vanished. My mother had picked up a heavy, silver-plated serving tray, same tray she had been forced to carry for him for a year. She didn't scream. She didn't cry out. She swung it with every ounce of the strength she had left after 2 years of slavery and fear. Klel, Engi. The sound was sickeningly solid, the sound of a bell tolling for a dead man. Marcus slumped over, blood blooming from a jagged gash on his forehead, falling onto the white lilies he had bought with my life's blood. He fell like a sack of stones, his tuxedo finally stained with the reality of his actions. The aftermath was a chaotic blur of blue lights, sirens, and cold interrogation rooms. The Sterling Empire, built on a foundation of lies and my mother's tears, vanished in a single night. When the police arrived, they didn't arrest me. They couldn't. The evidence was everywhere, in the live stream, in the documents the internet sleuths had uncovered in minutes, and in the physical bruises on my mother's arms. Marcus was taken away in an ambulance, his hands handcuffed to the cold steel of the gurney. Sarah was escorted into a patrol car, her white silk dress stained with wine, blood, and the wreckage of her ambition. The district attorney resigned by sunrise, citing personal reasons that no one believed. I sat with my mother on that bench. She was shaking, her hand clutched in mine like it was the only thing keeping her from floating away. "I'm sorry, Leo," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the morning traffic. "I should have told you. I should have fought back earlier. I was so afraid for you." "You did fight back, Mum," I said, touching the bandage on my forehead where a piece of glass had cut me. "You saved me. You ended it." But the victory felt like ashes in my mouth. We had no home. We had no money. I had destroyed my health and my youth for a lie. and she had destroyed her spirit for a threat. We were standing on the sidewalk with nothing but the clothes on our backs, and a story that the world would forget by tomorrow. A black sedan pulled up to the curb, its engine purring softly. A man in a plain charcoal suit stepped out. He didn't look like a cop. He looked like an accountant or a lawyer, someone who dealt in the hard reality of numbers. "Mr. Rossi," he said, nodding to me with a professional respect I hadn't felt in years. "My name is Miller. I'm with the court-appointed receivership for the Sterling assets. We've spent the night freezing every account associated with the Sterling Vance wedding. I don't care about the money anymore," I said, looking at the ground. "Just let us go. We want to be done with this." "You might want to care, Mr. Rossi," Miller said, handing me a thick manila folder. "During the search of Marcus's private safe at his penthouse, we found something unexpected. A life insurance policy and a sealed trust fund." I opened the folder with numb fingers. My eyes scanned the legal jargon until they hit a name I didn't recognize. "Marcus Sterling Sr., who is this?" I asked. "Marcus's father," Miller said. "He died 3 years ago. He was a very wealthy man, a developer. He left his entire estate to his 2 sons to be shared equally upon his death. But Marcus, he hid the existence of the second son from the probate court. He used the trust money to build his new identity. But the trust required medical proof of a family emergency to release the bulk of the principal before he turned 30. I looked at my mother. She looked away, her face flushing with a hidden shame that had been buried for 20 years. "Leo," she whispered, her voice trembling, "I never told you, before your father passed, there was a man. Marcus's father. It was only for a summer. I didn't know he was wealthy. I didn't even know he had another son until Marcus showed up at our door 2 years ago with those documents." The twist hit me harder than Marcus's tackle ever could. Marcus wasn't just my friend. He was my half-brother. He knew about the inheritance from the start. He knew that if I stayed in town, I'd eventually be found by the estate lawyers. So he invented the cancer. He sent me away to the other side of the country. He made me send him money to prove a medical need to the trust officers so he could trigger the release of the millions of dollars for himself. He hadn't just stolen my money. He had stolen my birthright. He had treated his own brother like a slave, and his own stepmother like a servant just to protect a pile of gold he didn't earn. He wanted me to suffer because he hated the fact that I existed. "The court has ruled the trust was obtained through extreme fraud," Miller said, his voice bringing me back to the present. "Since Marcus is now a convicted felon and the primary architect of the fraud, the entire estate, the house, the remaining liquid assets, and the trustees being transferred to you as the sole remaining legal heir, effective immediately." I looked at the check attached to the front of the folder. $1.2 million. It was enough to buy 10 houses, enough to pay for 1,000 surgeries, enough to make sure I never had to lift a crate or skip a meal ever again. I looked at the check. Then I looked at the police station where Marcus was being held in the infirmary. I thought about the 2 years of cold, hunger, and bone-deep fear. I thought about the broken skin on my mother's hands and the light that had gone out in her eyes. I took the check, folded it, and handed it to my mother. "Buy the house back, Mom," I said, my voice finally firm. "And buy the one next to it. Burn them both down if you want to. Build something new. Build a life where you never have to be afraid of a shadow again." "Where are you going?" she asked, her voice filled with a new kind of worry. I looked at my hands. They were scarred, calloused, and strong. I wasn't the boy who left 2 years ago. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was a man who had walked through the fire and come out the other side. "I'm going to find a place where the air doesn't smell like secrets," I said. "I'm going to find out who I am when I'm not working for a ghost." I started walking down the street, the morning sun finally breaking through the clouds. I didn't have a suitcase. I didn't have a plan. I didn't even have a destination. But as the light began to wash over the jagged, ugly skyline of the city, I realized something important. Marcus had tried to bury me in a warehouse. He tried to drown me in debt and guilt. But he forgot one fundamental thing about people who have spent their entire lives in the dark. We're the only ones who truly know how to find the light.